How did Danny Briere get your Philadelphia Flyers to become a playoff team? How can he get your Flyers to become a different tier of a team, a true contender, not just one and done? Well, let's first start with a history lesson. Patience ultimately proved positive for Danny Briere. Over just this 3-season time period, now 4 off seasons effectively, you have to trace things back to Danny Briere not panicking, not making moves for the sake of it. You think about his phrasing of the players will decide this, the players will dictate the pace of this rebuild. What some would criticize, myself including, the idea that a passive approach isn't necessarily the smartest approach. But at the end of the day, if you are going to be active in how you manage and how you ultimately shape this team to take steps to get out of a rebuild, you got to be pretty darn sure of what you have. And that he has been able to do. And once he has become aware of what he hasn't been afraid to trade them. Specifically, a Joel Farabee, a Morgan Frost type of deal. That is an epitome of circumstance and timing. A shock in-season move, relatively speaking. But it ultimately put your Flyers in a better position. I think that's safe to say. Danny Briere ultimately made strides in this phase of the rebuild, now turning into more of the retooling / rebuilding toward a playoff and beyond expectation. You got to go back to the first big time move. How about Ivan Provorov? Talk about getting real value out of your active big time acquisitions. You trade Provorov for a first round pick, which turned into Oliver Bonk, who has yet to make a sustained impact, if you will, but showed some flashes, showed some ability in short order in a playoff run toward the end. Little 2 points in the regular season finale. Oliver Bonk looks to potentially be a legitimate second pair right shot defenseman. You got that for Ivan Provorov. You got a second round pick, which became effectively Carson Bjarnason, who could be a potential NHL goaltender. We'll see. Long way to go. But you got Sean Walker, who you turned into a first round pick that ultimately was packaged in 2025, the Colorado 2025 first, with a Florida first to turn into Jack Nesbitt, a potential, if things break right, a freak, physically dominant second line center with offensive chops, has to fix the skating, but is going to have massive opportunity at Michigan this upcoming season, developmentally. One of the higher ceilings, if not the highest center ceiling amongst your Flyers prospects, all for Ivan Provorov. Talk about bargains, the true bargain bin. The 2025 free agent class, Dan Vladar, Christian Dvorak, your second line center effectively, your now bona fide franchise goalie, at least for the immediate, near term, midterm. Now you give that big time extension, which was well warranted given the level that Dan Vladar played to in the expanded role that he received with your Philadelphia Flyers. Identifying talent, targeting picks, targeting players at the top of drafts, for example, to revert back to patience for a quick review of a Porter Martone. What he's done in just a year. Going to Michigan State, I think the Flyers would tell you they don't know if he would have been able to develop as much physically, come in, make as much of a difference when the Flyers exactly needed him to. Patience in that sense. And bargain finds for Danny Briere have been critical in this rebuild. But not everything's going to be positive. Sometimes you're going to face adversity. Sometimes things are just not going to go how you planned at all. What Danny Briere and this front office envisioned. Things falling apart. Like a potential Torrey Krug salary dump, a part of a larger deal, but he doesn't waive his no-move clause to go to your Flyers in that 2023 right of that draft where you were going to get some picks back at the start of your rebuild at the helm, where you would have had to trade Travis Sanheim. That was a part of the headliner going to St. Louis. Oh my gosh. Can you imagine where the Flyers would be if they had traded Travis Sanheim? Right now, I think you would be at least 3 years away from being a playoff team. Potentially more, because the cascade effect. Trading away Sanheim at that time, after you trade Provorov, you're talking Konechny's got to be next, right? At some point over the 2023 into the 2024 offseason, over that 12-month span, for the guy that was jonesing to get into the playoffs this past season with a Travis Sanheim and others, a strong roster comparatively to years past, to say the least. The Flyers might have been in a deep, deep rebuild, which could you have gotten maybe better picks, but it would have certainly lengthened things. And who knows, right? The picks, the lottery luck, could you become the Red Wings in terms of not even getting top 3 picks? Sometimes the best trades are the trades you don't make. How about a blunder that turned into not just nothing, with the Gauthier, the consternation, what we'll never really know from a full story perspective of he didn't want to meet with a John LeClair, a legend of the game. He wouldn't even talk because he felt seemingly scorned because he wasn't promised a year of his ELC burning, or didn't want him to be exposed to an absolute terrible, terrible environment for a young player. Hey man, you just got to get some time. We're really in the midst of changing regimes here. Gauthier didn't like that. We know the rest is history. A trade out of left field where you get Jamie Drysdale. So while you lose your top prospect at the time, you get now a bona fide one of your top 2 right shot defensemen, a guy who I think Jamie Drysdale has just gotten better, gotten healthier, a reclamation project, a former top pick himself. Really, really solid high-end player. Not quite to the 40 goals of Gauthier, but as far as recouping some major value, being in a really difficult spot, yes, you weren't able to convince Gauthier to sign, but you were able to get Jamie Drysdale, and you're able to get a second-round pick on top of that, a second-round pick, plus Ryan Poehling was ultimately the cost, the price that you just had to pay patiently, waiting and waiting an offseason, another, with the Ducks to get Trevor Zegras. It's been largely swift, largely responsible and smart negotiations and striking when the time is right with Briere and trades. There has yet to be a truly head-scratching, fundamentally, oh my God, what did we do type of move to this point. But where do we go from here? How do we get to a next level? You've got to posture, you've got to position yourself for the big time move. And who might that be to take the Flyers to the next level? Well, we have quite a report breaking from a Minnesota-based, a great reporter, Michael Russo, on the sheet with Jeff Merrick. With regards to Larkin, we know the Wild are one of the favorites, or one of the teams he initially gave on that very limited 3-team list, but the other 2 teams on that 3-team initial list, Vegas and Florida, Russo saying that they're out on Larkin. They are out on Larkin. Florida I'm sure a Matthew Tkachuk at the time at the Olympics was making his sales pitch to a Dylan Larkin. But early in this offseason, they burned all their asset base to bring in a impact forward, impact player. They bring his brother Brady Tkachuk. There's no asset pool really to work with for Florida, given their roster is relatively set in stone, and they love what they got, and understandably. They know they just got to be healthy, and the two-time Cup champs prior to this last season. You get it. And you also look to Vegas. Eichel, I'm sure, Hannafin, Team USA teammates on that gold medal pursuit with a Larkin, they would have lobbied a team of interest. But Vegas just doesn't have, they don't have the asset base or the real motivation to bring in a Dylan Larkin if they have to trade away, quote, a number one center. We know it's Eichel. That's just a pie in the sky. That's never happening. Eichel is above Dylan Larkin easily. There's just no easy permutation with Vegas, with Florida. So Minnesota, is that just the only possibility? I don't see. The longer this drags out, the more I think, okay, Detroit, they're not going to be backed into a corner regardless of if Yzerman's there or not. No GM wants to just be beholden to one team, the Minnesota Wild, because of Quinn Hughes, because of Faber, Boldy, other Team USA guys, Guerin, the GM. They would, if anything, be highly motivated to look to any other team to force Larkin as they get closer and closer to the regular season. Mind you, Dylan Larkin still has multiple years of term left on his deal. They're not at risk, similar to anywhere close to, say, a Werenski or even a big fish like a Matthews or McDavid. So there is cards to, the more I look at it, there's cards to play for Detroit management. So what does Dylan Larkin have the card to play? And mutually beneficial, just expand the list. Expand the list. You got to name more teams. And I think your Philadelphia Flyers would have to be amongst the next 3 or 4 teams that Larkin would consider. We know Zegras, there's that relationship. Going to the World Cup together, having a good time. Zegras had to say something, right? But as far as an asset pool that Danny Briere is just willing to tap into to acquire a bona fide top 6, a low-end, call spade a spade, low-end number 1 center that would no doubt be the top center, the top pivot for your Philadelphia Flyers. Trade away a Tippett plus a Cam York and a prospect / pick, some permutation there, and get yourself a Dylan Larkin. That's how you take this Flyers team to the next level. Do you guys agree? Let me know in the comments. Have a great one. I'll see you in the next one. Let's go, Flyers.